Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show, and my special co-pilot this week. I need a co-pilot, man. I needed a co-pilot desperately with some competence, and his name is Matt Wilhelm. He's been on this show several times before, but Matt Wilhelm is always great when I see you over there in that right seat, man, ready to be the co-pilot.
I love being the co-pilot. I don't want to be the lead pilot because you get all the blame if the plane crashes. I just, get to point the finger at you and be the saving grace if it does start going down. But happy to be here, Tim. And again, kick off college football again with the Buckeyes victory. Not the way a lot of people thought it, but here we go.
Yeah. And by the way, I've got a special guest in between here that I recorded before you came on. But
somebody I've heard of before.
Somebody you heard of before. It rhymes with railroad trestle. It's Jim Tressel, and five-time winning national championship coach, one time with the Ohio State Buckeyes in 2002. And you happened to play on that team, if I remember correctly, correct?
Yes, sir, I did. 2 years actually with Coach Tress.
Exactly. But my point is, we had a pretty good interview just talking about, this is Youngstown State versus Ohio State. And I asked him what kind of special sweater vest does he have in mind. He does have one in mind because he has allegiances to both, but he wouldn't give me he wouldn't reveal it to me. Maybe it's still not back from the tailor.
Maybe is it split down the middle, like a different tone of red, like the Youngstown State red and Charlotte red on one side?
Yeah, I told him he lucked out because red's the primary color, going to be the primary color in it, so he can kind of go wild with the OYS.
He can pick one of the 50 he has hanging in his closet to choose from.
Yeah. It would be funny if he just scribbled in a Y, right?
Yeah.
But with a magic marker. But I digress. No one knows what a magic marker is anymore. Sharpie. But the bottom line is, let's get first a couple things about Ohio State, and they're going in to play this game against Youngstown State. They're going to work on some things in this game because that's what you do in these kind of matches. Even Jim Tressel admitted that's what you do. You go in with some things you definitely want to get done, not really from a practice standpoint, but run it against live competition and see how it holds, see how it sticks on the wall. This past Saturday was a totally different endeavor. You're starting the season with a Big Ten opponent on the road. And Indiana, Indiana, Ohio State was a 30-point favorite. They won by 20, so they missed it by 10. They won by literally 3 touchdowns, but that's not good enough, right? But my point is, games at Indiana the last couple of decades have been interesting games, and this one held up to that in another respect. Except Indiana, we're going to talk about Ohio State's defense in depth on the second half of this show, or the second half with you. But I wanted to get your take.
Sure.
Does Ohio State have, in your estimation, being an alum, being someone who's won a national championship, being someone who watched a quarterback drama kind of play out in front of him in 2001, when Craig Krenzel had to go in for Steve Belisari, and then, all that kind of stuff. Sure. Does Ohio State have a situation at quarterback, or did you come out of this, watching this game, feeling, what was your feel about the quarterback situation?
Well, I think the entire schedule, I think so many Buckeye fans and Buckeye commentators or college football commentators across the country, hang their hat on Ohio State's ability to compete and or win a national championship, all centered around that position, because we have such great depth at most other positions, and we're, a very well put together football team. We saw what we were capable of last year against Georgia, pushing them to the limits and a made field goal away from playing in the national championship and likely winning it against TCU.
Yeah.
So yes. To the one other thing that I want to address really quick before I even dig into the quarterback situation is the schedule plays out, I believe, almost perfectly for being in the situation we're in with Kyle McCord, Devin Brown. Gosh, some folks were even calling for Lincoln Kleinholtz, but the fact that you talked about it, not saying that Indiana is the greatest challenge in the world, but on the road in a Big Ten game, that matters. And and I used to say, this used to be the equivalent. Marty Schottenheimer used to call division games, which are kind of like conference games, they used to count for 1.5.
Yeah,
because they're different than just a win over Youngstown State or a win over, Western Kentucky, or even a win over Notre Dame. They all matter and college football is of course different than the NFL, but when you win in division or win in conference, it counts for 1.5 because it just means more. So you accomplished your mission, you won. Again, the players, the coaches, they don't care about the Vegas lines. So that 30 gets thrown out the door. Was it what we all thought it would look like? No. It's why people are still skeptical about Ryan Day, skeptical about who should be a quarterback. And I think in some cases, and this is just where my brain goes, I think sometimes our fan base looks at, and I have ESPN up in front of me for this reason, looks at the 49-13 Tennessee over Virginia, the 73-0 Oklahoma over Arkansas State, Mississippi put 73 on Mercer, 73-7. Oregon scores 81, and they expect, hey, we're Ohio State. We almost won the national championship last year. We've got all these great players, all these 4-star, 5-star recruits. Why can't we just roll our helmets out there and score 60 points? Now, that may very well happen this coming week, I believe, and then potentially look very similar, but not have 60 against Western Kentucky, which might be a little bit more of a competitive football game. But that said, having been in and around the program throughout the offseason, recruiting with, my son down there at camp, which, allows me the opportunity to rub elbows with some folks there inside the Woody, is they looked at this truly as a competition. They don't look at it, and I'm not trying to say they're going to switch it to Devin Brown and not play Kyle McCord in this next game. They looked at it as a competition, and they looked at this first 3-game schedule, first three games, as an opportunity to truly evaluate both of these young men with like bullets flying in games that matter. Because Kyle McCord's the only one that's played an actual snap in a game now that Devin Brown has, but all of it was in cleanup duty behind C.J. Stroud the last couple of years. And even furthermore, to bring up Jim Tressel's point, which that coaches have when going into a football game against an inferior opponent like Youngstown State. Because here's the thing: we can rattle off all the 4-stars and 5-stars that we have, but until they actually get out there in a real game, how they looked in high school, how they've looked in practice, doesn't matter until you get out there with the bullets flying against another competitive football team that wants to knock you off your pedestal, and you actually have to take the game planning and execute it and run the right routes and get the communication from the sideline. So there's a lot of layers to week 1, week 2, week 3. And I think ultimately, and I'll put an exclamation point on this opener, is all of this can get figured out and look more of what we expected to look like week 1 ahead of a very big game, which is week 4, going over to South Bend, Indiana against Notre Dame.
Yeah. And, this is what I kept reminding people that Ryan Day was looking at is CJ Stroud, Kyle McCord as a freshman did start and complete the Akron game and won the Akron game, or he was the winning pitcher in the Akron game while they let CJ Stroud rest his ailing shoulder. Yep. So number one, he had that on his resume. It was against Akron, as even Urban Meyer said, but that was Akron. It wasn't, second half against Michigan like Dwayne Haskins Jr. had in 2017 when they came back and won that game, which gave him a leg up on Joe Burrow, a guy named Joe Burrow. And but then this was an opening game on the road against a conference opponent. You're going to go in with the guy the best in that kind of situation, which is what he did with Kyle McCord. I don't think the competition is over. I think you went in with the starting pitcher that a little bit better than the other one. And now let's see what happens in these next 2 games.
Not only that, you're not wrong, Tim. But not only that, I think that if you look at the makeup of the 2 players, because Kyle McCord is much more of the pocket passer, and Devin Brown's the better athlete, the more dual threat player. Look at the quarterbacks that we've had, or the quarterback we've had the last 2 years. He was a pocket passing quarterback. So Kyle McCord can most likely execute. That, of course, you talked about the Akron game, executing the game plan under Ryan Day, but then he's probably the most like CJ Stroud in his, I'm not talking about arm strength. I'm talking about it, meaning a pocket passer and playing from the pocket, not wanting to take off and run it. Whereas I think if you go with Devin Brown, I think the receivers, the receivers, you call different plays, with a dual threat quarterback. The run game looks a little bit different with a dual threat quarterback because you feel like, he can take off and run it and pull it as opposed to giving it to a running back more often than not. And I think it deviates from what Ryan Day's been so comfortable with game planning in the last say 24 months with a pocket passing quarterback. And my gosh, and we all know it. It wasn't until the Georgia game that C.J. Stroud finally heard the fans or was being coached to, if it's available, take off and run for a first down. Don't hold on to it and try to have to throw for one time and time again. So that's the one thing to pull across is the heavy lifting of a dual threat quarterback changes our offense, where it's very comfortable given his experience and given he's much more like what we've been accustomed to seeing the last 2 years.
Yeah. Hey, let me just jump in here real quick. This is going to be the 2023 Ohio State football team season opener Saturday in the Horseshoe, noon kickoff. And you forgot to get tickets. And it's Ohio State versus Youngstown State. And you're in luck, because not only does the Game Time app and gametime.co, not only do they have tickets available for this game, they're starting at $36 a get-in price, $36. And if you download the Game Time app and use it for the first time, you get and use the promo code Buckeyes, you get $20 off that first purchase. So, you can do the math on that one, how cheaply you can get in and see Ohio State, one of the top ranked teams in the country. Yeah, they're still got a little quarterback battle going on, it does appear, but you can see one of the top teams in the country for pennies on the dollar. $36 get-in price if you've already got the Game Time app or at gametime.co. And of course, if you use this, you find a ticket for $36 on the Game Time app, and then all of a sudden you find it somewhere else for cheaper, Game Time will refund 110% of the difference in those two prices. Now, terms apply, of course, always terms apply, but that's a hell of a deal in my book. So gametime.co, the Game Time app is the place to go for all your ticket needs. If you're planning ahead for Ohio State games down the road, etc. Game Time is the place to go. The Game Time app, gametime.co. And remember, if you download the Game Time app and you make a purchase and you use the promo code Buckeyes, that's the promo code Buckeyes, you get $20 off your first purchase. So go download the Game Time app today and enjoy many happy returns as you go see your favorite sporting events. And this is really the get out of jail free card, from the extent of if you put off trying to obtain tickets to your special event, they should be available on the Game Time app. And good luck with the Game Time app. It will bring good luck to you. Now let's get back to that conversation Matt Wilhelm and I are having about the quarterback situation at Ohio State. Yeah. And here's the thing, McCord can run too. Does he run as well as Devin Brown? We're hearing Devin Brown's a hell of a runner, but we haven't really seen it,
Right.
And it's ironic that on his 3 plays he got in the first half, the third play was a quarterback, basically, quarterback power to the right, pulling guard and everything else. And he gets tackled in the backfield, that was almost a made for TV sort of like mess that then Ohio State will spend this next week explaining, even right day after the game was trying to explain. But I wanted to ask you this. Forget about the quarterback. The offensive line had its problems, and it wasn't so much, they weren't blocking people, but it was so much they couldn't block everybody, to a certain extent. What was just your take on where the offensive line played in particular?
I'd say it was average, not even good. I think it was extremely subpar for the standard that we expected Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that, jumps out to me is, now there's also a little conundrum in the running back room, because of Traynum and Travion and now Mayan Williams. And again, it seems as if they're all comfortable kind of like being a 3-headed monster and there's no ego in that room, so be it. It only benefits us, right? But that said, again, having the stats up in front of me and kind of like watching the football game, it was very apparent, like a 19-yard gain by Travion and a 17-yard gain by Traynum, are the only long runs that we had in the game. And that means a few things. That means we're not, we're just not popping off the ball, getting up onto the second level. We're handling the defensive front, but maybe never getting on the backer. So it's 3 to 5 yards in a cloud of dust. And we've only, and in some cases, you watch the runs, it's our great running backs running away from a linebacker or making a safety miss is the only reason it popped. And we've seen, the Zeke touchdown in 2014 was a perfectly blocked Alabama defense and an elite running back running away from everybody through a massive hole. And we just didn't see that. So, and I also think, Kyle McCord, can he do better? 100%. And we'd all be, we can all agree with that. But I do think that he never really looked comfortable maybe until mid-third quarter.
Yeah.
When he got into a little bit of rhythm. And then I also think, when it comes to, not deviating from the offensive line, but I think when it also comes to when you're a quarterback and you have two receivers, one that's likely going to be a top 5 pick, one that's probably going to be a top 25 pick, and again, in a probably a first or second day tight end in Cade Stover, and you've got these young 5 stars, that are the heir apparents to these guys that are going to move on.
Yeah.
There's some pressure to deliver the football to those guys.
Yeah.
Ryan Day calls the plays. And if you don't have the time to deliver the football to Marvin Harrison, to Ibuka, in the open windows, there's pressure to have to, I got to get my guys the ball. I got to keep Marvin Harrison a Heisman Trophy candidate. All those things are playing out, not maybe in the game, but you're talking about a 21-year-old kid, making his first, real start, as the man at the quarterback. So there's just a lot of layers to it. And to bring it back around, like the offensive line, both in the run game, because, going back to Urban Meyer and Coach and Tress, it's like, the run game's opens up the pass. You got to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to run the ball at will, regardless of who it is running it, and it opens up the pass. And I think Ryan Day, given his NFL background, sees the game the same way. You just can't come out and go pass, regardless of how much talent we have. And if we don't have a bruising physical offensive line that can give him the time, and you can't really pop open the holes, the defense is just not going to respect it. Yeah. So the defense, the 4 down, can pin their ears back, and go try to tee off on McCord, and they're dropping 7, and it's tough on anybody, as a receiver to have to try to scheme everybody open and then have your new quarterback delivering the football in a timely manner.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, like I've pointed out on a couple of TV interviews and radio and stuff since then, Kyle McCord looked like he was pretty much tutored, throw the ball to the guy we've schemed for this play almost, because there were several times when a quick read of a safety or a quick read of the field would have told you, oh my goodness, I'm going to throw to this guy, including,
it screams, young starter. Yes. It screams
do what we tell you.
Starting, like it screams high school football, honestly, in some cases, where although you have the player on the field who's playing, he's being controlled by the puppet master on the sideline telling him what to do.
Correct. I mean, it had to be.
And until we can overcome that, and the one key word, and I've heard that many times since the game between now, is there's got to be a level of trust that is both given and earned. Given by Ryan Day and earned by either Devin Brown and or Kyle McCord in this situation, to just be able to relax and let it rip and go out and play quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? Let's take a little break here from me and you, and let's get to my conversation with Jim Tressel. This is a special weekend, a special Saturday for Jim Tressel, because he was the national championship winning coach at Youngstown State before he came to Ohio State and became a national championship winning coach for 10 years. Played for 2 more national championships. Obviously, we know his ignominious end there at Ohio State, which he and I get into a little bit too. But he's been on my show a few times since his retirement from Youngstown State, where he went back and became the longstanding president at Youngstown State. I mean, what a career, right, Matt? And and here he is. He's going to be in the press box or wherever he's going to be on Saturday, and believe me, he still bleeds scarlet and gray. I know he likes penguin black and red too, but scarlet and gray, right? I mean, you've been around him since.
Absolutely, yes. We were actually had an amazing, and I know I've talked about it before in the past, but in the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer, Coach Tressel and Ellen, his wife, were on the cruise this year. It was great to see him fresh after retirement, enjoying a well-needed cruise. But then he gets bothered by all of us, right?
Yeah, of course.
Players who played for him, who want that time with him to just reconnect. Fans want that intimate opportunity to be with Coach Tressel because of what he means to our program. And it's awesome. He's actually, he's living over in Medina, up our way. And I asked him, I'm like, Medina, like, why'd you land in Medina? And it makes all the sense in the world because it's like Cleveland, Columbus, Youngstown, and Akron. Like he's like, he's
Yeah.
an hour and 15 minutes from all of them.
Yeah.
So it makes all
And
the sense in
Berea,
the world.
right up the street.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So again, to give you great to connect with him. It's been great, situationally for him to meet my son, who's also playing football, and allow him to follow his career. And I just think even Chase Ferris and Troy Smith and Duran Grant are the head coaches or the coaches at Elyria Catholic, my alma mater.
Right.
And Tressel has made a visit to Elyria Catholic to kind of speak to the team. So he's still strategically showing up to talk to Tim May and going over to Elyria Catholic to talk to some young men. He's never deviated, not one time, even in the opportunity for why he left Ohio State. It was, love of his players, love of people, and just giving is a word when I think of Jim Tressel. Winning and giving, is when you think of Jim Tressel, and he still does it to this day.
Well, hey, let's get to my conversation with him. We'll come back and chat a little bit about that, but we'll move on to a conversation about the Ohio State defense, which I'm really excited to get your opinion on what we saw Saturday. I thought was very telling. But anyway, here's my conversation with Jim Tressel. Wow, Coach Tressel, Jim Tressel, welcome back to the Tim May Show. This is what, a quad core, tricore, whatever it is. But I'm glad to have you back, my man.
Well, it's always good to talk with you. In fact, how many decades have we been talking? I know podcast is new, but we've been talking for decades.
Well, dude, you were the quarterback coach at Ohio State when I first started covering Ohio State way back in 1984, and then you moved off to Youngstown State, won 4 national championships, if I have the number right there, and then showed back up at Ohio State, hat in hand, and said, "I humbly accept the head coaching position," and went on to win another national championship and played for 2 more. Yeah, I've been talking to you a lot off and on through the years, and of course we stayed in touch after the ignominious end to everything, which I'm going to ask you about a little bit again, revisit that only because of the way things have transpired with the NCAA, which seems to be fading fast in the West, like the sunset. But yeah, we've talked a lot, and you know me, I've always enjoyed it.
Right. No, I've always appreciated you. I've known you have a hard job, and you've known I have a hard job. And I think when people know one another, they get along.
Yeah. And sometimes when you don't get along, you still get along because you understand each other, right? I mean, you can have conflict without having a divergence, right?
Well, that's right. I didn't say we always agreed.
Yeah.
Right. But that's okay.
I'll never forget. This segues into what I want to ask you about. I'll never forget 2001, a press conference. We used to have over there at the at that little facility off Olentangy River Road, and I asked you emphatically, why can't you play 2 quarterbacks? And you said, well, we're not playing 2 fullbacks. And I sat there stunned, like, okay, Jamar Martin, remember, was the starting fullback then. And then that afternoon at practice, I walked up to you and I went, Nate Stead. And he goes, what? You go, what? I go, Nate Stead, he's a fullback and he played against Northwestern. And you know what he said to me? This was so hilarious because if I flustered, I was at the press conference. He said, see, you got to be quicker. But that was a year when a lot of people, were asking about the quarterback play, and, every quarterback conundrum is different. Ryan Day is going through one right now with 2 highly recruited players who both have great talent. You can see it when they practice and stuff. And then Kyle McCord didn't exactly light up the landscape when Ryan Day went with him on last week at Indiana. He didn't play badly. He just didn't play like CJ Stroud, and I'm just wondering, put people in your shoes, but in Ryan Day's head also, of what he's going through right now, trying to find that quarterback when there were other things that were wrong with that offense other than quarterback.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the quarterback position, we always talked about can you find a way to have two quarterbacks good enough to win the Big Ten championship or the national championship? And so coaches are not thinking solely about who the number one quarterback is. They're thinking about, can we, if something happens, if we get banged up, whatever, are we going to be able to continue to be as good as we can be? I mean, think back to 2014. What did we play? 3 quarterbacks?
Yeah.
And went on, but we had, fortunately, 3 quarterbacks good enough to win the national championship. So part of what Ryan's thinking about is, are we progressing well enough at that position as a whole? Just like you have to have enough fullbacks, to win the national. I mean, every position, enough holders. We used to always talk in the special teams, do you have a pair and a spare?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you have to have. And so obviously a lot of focus gets put on the quarterback. I always liked it when there was a clear person that everyone looked to, that the defense had great confidence in. If we could just stop him one more time, he's going to take us down the field and that type of thing. But anytime you graduate someone, the story gets revved up again. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole game on Saturday. I got to see the second half. I was coming back from a tough loss. Baldwin Wallace lost to Mount St. Joseph, and I was over at BW watching over 1,100 total yards. It looked like a crazy back and forth. And so I didn't get to the TV until the second half. And I haven't seen that much of Kyle McCord. I haven't seen that much of Devin Brown, or I don't even know who the third person is. And but I know that Ryan is grading every single one of them from the first guy to the fourth guy, trying to help them understand what they have to do to get better. And the people won't stop talking about it until we can demonstrate, that there's someone who you can point to something that they took the reins. And what's a little bit nerve-wracking if you're a Youngstown State person is usually the biggest improvement happens between game 1 and game 2. Now, I hope that happens for both those teams. I hope they both play better than they did the first week. But I'm sure Kyle McCord and Devin Brown and everybody else on that offensive team and defensive team and special teams are going to play better on both sides. And so that's the fun. But remember, Tim, September is for pretenders.
Yeah.
November is for contenders. So the discussion is really important to the answer to your question in November.
Yeah. The games they remember are the ones in November, and then the ones they add on in December.
Right.
And then possibly the one in January. You're exactly right. By the way, speaking of Youngstown State, they opened with a win also against a team from Indiana, Valparaiso, 52-10, which leads me to the question I wanted to get to in the first place, but I can't. The most pressing thing going on in Columbus right now is that starting quarterback situation. It should be offensive line play, in my opinion, but that's another story. What's your sweater vest going to look like in Ohio Stadium on Saturday? Youngstown State versus Ohio State. You won 4 national championships with Youngstown State. You won 1 at Ohio State, sort of flipped the program back into a national consciousness and played for 2 more. Give people an idea what that sweater vest is. Is it going to be something special? I know you're probably not going to unveil it on the Tim May show, but what you got in mind?
Well, we're not going to unveil it, but I will unveil the fact that it will be a sweater vest and it will be something special. How's that?
Well, like I was telling you before we started this show, it helps you that both teams have red in their color, right? So you don't have to go crazy with some kind of Notre Dame, Ohio State kind of thing like Lorenzo Stiles Sr. had to do maybe last year. But
or Laura Hawk. Didn't Laura Hawk have to
wear exactly
double jersey?
2000, what was that, 2005 season, but that Fiesta Bowl didn't work out so well for the Notre Dame side of that jersey. Right. But I want to ask you this: is it how cool is it, or how heartbreaking or splitting is it to see your 2 big time teams go against each other when one has a clear personnel advantage? I'm talking about Ohio State, yet Youngstown State is game enough to take this game for the 3rd time. Y'all played them 2 in a row, and you weren't too easy on your former team back in the mid 70s, or excuse me, the mid 2000s. I've got too many decades in my head right now, Coach Tressel. But I don't know. Is that tough for you to watch, or are you just sort of like, I don't know, a little bit of a trophy, to put on your mental shelf that I coached both of these teams. This is kind of cool.
Well, no, it's real cool. I mean, the opportunity for the kids from Youngstown State to play in the Horseshoe. I'm sure many of them who are from Ohio dreamed about that. The chance to go up against a team like Ohio State and measure yourself. They have a tough challenge ahead of them. The Missouri Valley Football Conference is clearly the #1 conference in FCS football, and you're going to have to be able to beat South Dakota State, North Dakota State, and Northern Iowa, and people like that.
That's crazy.
So having a chance in your preparation preseason, if you will, to play against someone like the Buckeyes is going to be a great exercise for them. It'll be tough. There's no question about it. I think the good challenge for the Buckeyes is, how can you focus on getting better at what you now have got a game in the books? You've got a bunch of film to look at. How can you get better at what you do so that you can, every time you take the field, take your level of play up a little bit and get some young people with some experience. And so it'll be a great thing for both teams. We'll be awfully proud to think about, I think, nearly 37 years of our 47 or 8 years of higher education is at those two places. And those two places have given me opportunities and so many great people that we've grown to love and know. And so just seeing them both on the field will be fun. We'll have our grandkids there, our kids there. And, it just, those are two places that are very important to our family.
You're not going to be standing out on the street there before the game, Woody Hayes Drive, going need 4, are you? Need 4?
No, I'm in good shape for this one.
You're in all right, good shape. Yeah, that's great. I hate to see that, but I wanted to ask you. This is the interesting part is when you were the head coach at Ohio State and you played Youngstown State, and you just talked about it, touched on it a little bit, but obviously you want to win the game. That's the primary goal. But do you go into it as a little bit of for want of another term, a glorified preseason game where you can try some things? I mean, how did you approach it?
I think like any other early season game, there were certain things you needed some of your players to do. So conceptually, what did your quarterback need to work on? What does your secondary need to work on? What are the things that through spring and preseason we haven't had a good enough look at? How do you want to challenge yourself? And really, whether it was Youngstown State or Texas Tech, in the kickoff classic in 2002, you're at a certain stage in your growth and you're trying to grow. And, we used to always say that you can't win the national championship in the spring, but you can lose it if you don't progress enough. Well, the same thing is true in preseason camp. You can't win the national championship in preseason camp, but you can lose it if you don't progress. Same thing with your pre-conference games. You can't win the national championship simply in those games, but if you don't progress enough, you can lose it. And so that's the way you looked at it, regardless of who it was. I never enjoyed playing Youngstown State when I was at Ohio State. I didn't enjoy playing Cincinnati when Mark D'Antonio was there. I didn't enjoy playing Michigan State when Mark D'Antonio was there. Those types of things, because, those are like family. But when the whistle blows, you have to put that behind you and focus on what you need to get done. And hopefully you'll feel good when they're over and you will have progressed.
I'm trying to remember when you were at Youngstown State as the head coach, did y'all play these kind of, like, I call them, check games? I mean, payday games. Did y'all play? I don't think you did you?
No, we really didn't. In fact, most of our pre-games, and we were independent for a lot of years, but we played a lot of games against the Mid-American, which, at the time had 85 scholarships and we had 63. And we looked at those as kind of our real challenge play up. They've got more personnel, and so, we played Akron, I think 10 times. We played Kent maybe 7 or 8 times, OU a couple times, Eastern Michigan 5 or 6 times. Central Michigan, Western Michigan, people like that. Those were always kind of our games for our guys to say, hey, I want to show I can play up.
Yeah.
But we never had that opportunity to play a money game. That really didn't happen for Youngstown State until maybe, I don't know, 05 or 06, maybe, when they got to play Pitt right across the road.
Right.
And then I think once the NCAA chose to allow 12 games, then all of a sudden people were looking for games. And that's when the FCS teams, or back then it was 1AA, all of a sudden got into the mix.
Yeah. I'm just curious though, because, you really, MAC teams are, pretty well stacked too, from a personnel standpoint, not quite maybe to the level, obviously, of Ohio State and some Big Ten teams, but I've always, people always look at these games as lopsided, one-sided, and a great way for a team like Ohio State to make some progress, to work on some things. But the flip side of it is, like you said, the Youngstown State guys are going to come in here fired up about playing in Ohio Stadium, number one. But then number two, if I'm the head coach, I'm just going, but I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose, my front lines. That to me are where the real mismatches are in games like this, is down in the trenches. I don't want to lose my best left tackle or my best nose guard just for a paycheck. You know what I mean? It is a little bit daunting, right? In that respect, you don't want to lose games in October in losing a great player in September.
Well, there's no question. I mean, that's the way you feel about any game, whether it's you're playing Texas down in, Memorial Stadium. You hope you don't lose a bunch of players. And so the way that you have the best chance of not losing any players is if everyone's going full speed ahead and everyone's playing as hard as they can play. And, a lot of those injuries sometimes happen around when someone's a little bit lazy around the pile and someone gets rolled up on, or, those kinds of things. So if your focus is where it should be, there's always a % chance of injury. That's just the nature of the game. But my experience has always been, if we're going at high end speed and we're playing the way we should be playing in balance and all the rest, hopefully, those types of things will be minimized.
Yeah. Hey, I am curious more and more. I think about it, to see that sweater vest on Saturday, but I wanted to ask you how those years you spent, the years you spent as the Youngstown State president of the university and stuff, when you're sitting up there in the press box and things were not going well, were you able to, the VIP box, were you able to divorce yourself from, I would run this at this point? You understand what I'm saying? From being that consummate, not Monday morning quarterback, but looking over the shoulder kind of quarterback or coach for your head coaches and stuff, or does that ever leave you?
The hard part about being a president is usually, I know in our box, we would have anywhere from 75 to 100 people. And you invited them there because you appreciated what they did on behalf of the university. And so you were always talking and so forth. I probably didn't watch a half dozen plays a game.
Wow.
At a home game. That was just, the harsh reality. The away games, I got to see a little bit more. I would go to maybe 1 or 2 away games a year, or see them on TV. And so I got to watch our guys a little bit more away than home. But inevitably, you're in the president's box. So, hey, what do you think we should do here? I said, I don't know. I wasn't at practice. I have no idea. I have no idea what we're any good at. Or should we take a timeout? I said, well, I don't know. I was back here talking to so-and-so. Do we need a timeout? So anyway, honestly, those were not my favorite days because I knew we had a job to do, which was important for the university. But I would have really rather been watching the game. That's why I went to 3 games this weekend, and we went to the YSU game, but I didn't have to go to the president's box. And then we went on, that was Thursday night, and then Friday night we went to Glenville at Avon, and we got to stand on the sideline and watch that, and got to see Teddy Jr., Teddy Sr., Cardell, all those guys. And then on Saturday I got to stand on the sideline and really watch the Baldwin Wallace game. So those were 3 games. I haven't watched 3 games probably in the last 10 years. So it was a lot of fun.
Hey, but when you were back up in the box there for the Youngstown State games, when you were president, how often did you get someone sidling up to you and going, "Hey, man, maybe we need to change the head coach"? You understand where I'm going with that? I mean,
Sure, sure.
trying to bring some kind of pressure to bear or things like that. And number one, and number two, did it give you an appreciation for your bosses? Back during the day when people tried to bring pressure to bear who really didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But how did you handle those kind of situations?
Well, I probably had a little bit of an advantage because I knew that they didn't know what they were talking about, and they knew that I didn't know that I knew that they didn't know
Yeah,
what they were talking
yeah,
about. So it was really never, no one ever whispered those kinds of things. And again, I don't know if they do in other scenarios, but I'm sure they might because it's a fun conversation for some people. But uh, fortunately, I was never, privy to one of those kinds of conversations because if I were, it probably wouldn't have ended well with that person, and they might not have donated anymore.
yeah, and
our
good
case,
riddance, right?
right?
No, that just question popped into my mind because you're one of the you're the only guy I know who's ever served in both of those capacities, and head coach and also president of the university. I mean, that's craziness when you think about it. Uh, Real quick before I move on to a couple other things. So when you're watching those three games this past weekend, what do you, Jim Tressel, former head football coach, former national championship winning football coach, what do you watch? What you know what I mean?
I probably just watch the ball as much as anything. I might peek at the defense in terms of how are they lined up and what are they doing. But usually when you're watching the ball, you are in essence watching who's getting blocked and who can tackle and who's filling the right lanes and who's covering, that type of thing. And it's such a wide open uh, spread, throw it all over, world we live in that trying to just watch the big picture is kind of fun. And there's no doubt that it's a quarterback driven world we live in, and you can tell that the teams that are really good at that position, they're tough to stop because they, with all this RPO stuff and the way people can throw and catch and those gloves, it's impossible to drop a ball now. Those gloves have like suction cups on them, and so it's amazing to watch the people execute. And that's when you really appreciate when you really get down to it who can play defense, is because it's hard to play defense in this day and age. And that's where you kind of separate the top group from the rest.
Hey, as you watched the Ohio State game against Michigan last year and in the Georgia game, I mean, obviously all they had to do was stop them once in the fourth quarter, and Ohio State wins the Georgia game and goes on to the national championship game. As a former head coach, is that what you're most curious about this Ohio State team, whether it's got its act together defensively going into this year? Obviously, I think they're going to find their starting quarterback. They're going to get the offensive line figured out because Ryan Day, his track record with offense is big time. But I'm just wondering, as you watch those games, was that hard for you to watch? I mean, not just because the team up north beat Ohio State, but just the way it happened.
Yeah, it's really difficult when you get beat with big plays. It's one thing if someone can execute it and time after time after time. And we used to always measure, we probably weren't going to win a game if we didn't win the explosive gain category.
Right.
And if they had more explosive gains than we did, it's hard to win. Same with turnovers. I mean, there are certain ones that, and so, to see those explosive gains, but again, the quarterbacks and the athletes out there, and you better have things, well covered and well designed and keep things in front of you, which is hard sometimes, but, it's an ever-changing world without a doubt. And whether it's on the field with the X's and O's or off the field with the NIL and the portal, the world keeps changing, and whoever handles the change and can execute with creativity is going to be the team that, obviously you need great talent, but, I got to watch the second half of that LSU Florida State game yesterday, and Florida State looks like they're coming along, and just to see the talent and so forth, I think it's going to be a fun year of college football.
Yeah, that old line. Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield. Sometimes you're the packer, and sometimes you're the pavement. And Florida State was the packer on that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you though, do you like where major college football has gotten to now with the combination transfer portal and NIL and whatever it is you really want to call the NIL disguised as now? Because of course you expected the big time programs, especially down south, to take advantage of the loophole. But as a former president of a university, an NCAA university, can the NCAA possibly get their lasso around this thing?
Ooh, that we could probably have an entire podcast on that discussion.
Give me a short answer.
I think like anything else, you need to look backwards and see where we could have done better. And how did we get to this point? What could we have done better? And have the right people working on the solution. Yeah. And I think that's now that I've been a president, I guess I can say this. I'm not sure that decades and decades ago, when the presidents all of a sudden got engaged as deeply as they did, that maybe we had the right people working on the solution. And it's, I'd like to think that we could put a good group together. We could have put a good group together 40 years ago as revenue. Remember, deregulation of TV happened, about 40 years ago?
Yeah, in mid 80s or early mid 80s.
83, 84, right in there. We obviously anticipated that was going to be a revenue boost. That's the only reason you deregulate, right?
Yeah.
And so we probably didn't give it enough thought as to, okay, what are we going to do with this revenue boost? What is it going to impact? But we allowed it to evolve, and it evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved, and really never with the student athlete. They might have gotten more sweatsuits, but maybe not when you think about the magnitude of the revenue. So I think you need to look back a little bit and say, okay, if we could start over, what would we do? But the key, like anything else, is leadership. And I think you'd need to have the right people working on that. So fast forward where we are, the rules of engagement are the rules of engagement. So the people that do the best job of roster management and keeping things in the proper perspective and keeping the focus where it belongs are going to be the ones that are going to do well. And but the only thing constant is change, and there has certainly been a lot of change.
Yeah, boy, you segued me right into that. I mean, Jim Harbaugh serving a self-imposed university self-imposed 3-game suspension, just game days. I'm not sure what that even means. For it wasn't just buying a cheeseburger; it was for some violations that occurred that were minor in scale, but then when he opted not to give the according to the NCAA, when he opted not to give them the information or own up to some of the problems, they proposed, who knows what they proposed, because they claim things have been out of whack. But the bottom line is, for that, he's serving a 3-game game day suspensions and stuff. Everybody remembers Tatgate like it happened yesterday. And as Sports Illustrated revealed, some of those players also got some free fried chicken. I'm not diminishing what that meant in a lot of respects, and some things that went on, and some things that NCAA thought it had against you guys and Ohio State, which turned out to be at least a push, from the standpoint of what lawyers like Larry James did and others to refute some of those things. But the NCAA kind of looked the other way. We all know what happened to your career because of that, Coach Tressel. As you look back on that and you look at the way sentences are being handed out today, which are rare and far and in between. Are you bitter about what happened, about the way your coaching career ended vis-a-vis the NCAA?
No, not bitter at all. I mean, it's things happen as they happen. I was awfully fortunate to be a head football coach for 25 years, and I had a lot of good things happen. I had a lot of good fortune. And as fate would have it, I probably never would have become a college president if that didn't happen. I mean, who would have, I'm sure that I wasn't sitting around there in 2008-9 thinking about, hey, I think the next thing I'll do is be a college president, So we used to always tell our players, you can't be grateful and unhappy at the same time.
Yeah.
Those two things can't coexist. So you're either a grateful person or you're an unhappy person. And so I've always opted on the side of being grateful, and whatever the circumstances are, that's what you do, whether the referee threw the flag or we slipped and fell or the recruit went somewhere else. Okay, here's the situation. And what are we going to do from here? And so, I think bitterness steals from your own emotion. And, it's not easy sometimes. It's especially not easy on your family, the people that love you, that feel for you, and all those types of things. But no, I wouldn't say bitter whatsoever.
Well, let me throw some butter on the cake here, though. Bottom line is you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak. You got that job at Akron in administration, and then parlayed that really into becoming the president of Youngstown State. And, as your wife, Ellen, told me when you first took the job at Ohio State, one of the things you really appreciated about the opportunity of being at Ohio State was the young people you could affect with doing things the right way, but just showing people there's more to life than just money. There's more to life than just winning football games and stuff. Yet you did the latter extremely well. And did you find yourself at Youngstown State as the president in a way being able to affect people's lives even more, if you understand what I'm saying there? I mean, because you had a much wider, being the head coach at Ohio State, wow, you're known in Taiwan, you're known in probably India somewhere. There's probably a Jim Tressel poster, some guy there who became a fan. But did that bring out a part of you, the presidential part, that, wow, you look back on it, man, I'm glad I had this opportunity?
Oh, there's no question. I went from having 100 guys and 12 coaches to, 12,000 people and 2,000 employees. And so, no, I mean, and here's the best part, Tim, is it was even harder than being a head football coach, which, sometimes that's what the fun of it is, man, this is impossible.
Yeah.
So, let's get up. We wake up in the morning knowing, hey, we got a lot to do today. And so, no, I count my blessings constantly. Would have never written the script the way that it happened. But no one writes their script exactly the way it happens. And what your job is to work extremely hard, see what the results are, and then whatever the results are, move forward to the next challenge. And we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the beauty of football is you're always working to keep your football team intact and build it for the future. But the great thing about football is that 12 Saturdays every year, and in a bowl game back in your day, now it's like you maybe end up playing 4 games. I want to ask you about that real quick before we go postseason. But the point is, then you get really judged. You put all this together, and now we're going to find out whether we were successful or not, in a hard sometimes way. Whereas when you're steering a college, it's like an oil tanker. You're kind of turning it, and you're hoping it gets through the straits, right? And
one of the great advantages we had as coaches is we got to see progress. We got to have a scoreboard, and sometimes in the jobs all of us have, there may be little miniature scoreboards, but it was hard to have breakthroughs,
Yes.
And we could have a 2001 victory over Michigan breakthrough, we could have a Miami victory breakthrough. We could whatever, and it's a little harder. But again, you had to, as Bill Miles, you remember Bill Miles, one of the great ones ever, used to always say, never discount the importance of little victories. And I reminded myself of that constantly as a president, that it was hard to have big breakthroughs, but those little victories is what really moved the whole organization.
You saw where Gene Smith is stepping down, in June 30th. And I think he's done a hell of a job. I mean, I would think being an athletic director at Ohio State is one of those, every day, like you're talking about, it's not quite on the scale of being the president of the university, but every day, heck, every night, something can happen, and you've got to deal with it and stuff.
Yep.
But he, on my show here a month or so ago, when I was interviewing him, he can see a possibility of major college football, basically the upper level of major college football, eventually breaking away from the NCAA, maybe running its own self. As you eyeball this now, and you've eyeballed it from not really afar, but you have some insight on it. Do you see eventually that happening? That the big time schools maybe need another way of governing themselves and conducting business?
Yeah, I've been saying for decades that I thought that might come true. That there's different levels of athletics, and I'm not so sure it wouldn't benefit all levels if there'd be a little clarity of what level are we on, as opposed to trying to be on a level maybe that we're not on.
Yeah.
The only thing that's a little bit scary is the major college revenue certainly helps those lower levels that don't have the revenue. I'm not sure how it is now, but I know 10 years ago, whatever, that, the catastrophic liability insurance type things were funded from the national coffers, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That would be difficult for a Baldwin Wallace to be able to afford those kinds of things and not be in that big group insurance type thing. And I think you could figure out all those things, but I'm really a believer that you ought to be playing at the level you're playing at, and you ought to go back and really re-examine what are the values of being a part of organized activity. I don't care if it's marching band or athletics or the engineering Baja race team. There are certain values that can be gained from that, and certain levels at which you can invest in doing those activities. And again, I think decades ago, we could have made a lot better decisions than we did. Unfortunately, decisions were made, and most of them pointed toward revenue, as opposed to values. And, so we'll see if we're at a point, where we might take a fresh look at it. But as Gene said, eventually reality takes over, whether it takes, it took 40 years of TV deregulation and evolution of conference TV stations and, all that stuff or whatever. Ultimately, reality takes over, and, we'll see what reality looks like here down the road.
Yeah, it was moving back when you were the Ohio State head coach. The consummate goal, almost as you took the reins, the consummate goal was to play for the national championship. The consummate goal for Ohio State before that was to play in the Rose Bowl, win the Big Ten championship and play for the Rose Bowl. Now the Pac-12 has got 2 members left in it. Starting next year, as you look at it, are these crazy times? I mean, you got 4 teams coming from the Pac-12 are going to join the Big Ten next year. Are we talking about crazy times?
Well, I don't know if it's crazy. Disruptive times for sure. Disruptive times usually end up down the road at sorting things out. And so sometimes you have to go through that turbulence of disruptive times. But I think, at the end of the day, now sometimes the days are long, those TV contracts go through 2036 or, whatever. And, but ultimately things will settle out. there's a whole industry built on people sitting around talking about what that will be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, but people enjoy talking about it, and you know, I don't think that's going to change.
But college football was built so much when you and I were growing up. We're almost the same age. You're a little bit older than me, old man. Was built so much on tradition, on rivalries. I mean, you know, the Apple Cup may not happen anymore. The Civil War, whatever they call it, Oregon State, may not happen anymore based on the way things are going. Who knows? You know, where a lot of these, you know, USC Notre Dame may have to take a back seat. I mean, college football has moved from the tradition and laden stuff to almost now producing entertainment, right? Entertainment.
Well, you know, I think when it all sifts out and settles down, there'll be divisions, and just like there's Browns and Steelers, you know, still are the rivalry. You know, the Ohio State Michigan is still going to be the rivalry. You know, it doesn't mean that the Browns against the Bengals isn't a big deal, you know, because it will be. Well, so will the Buckeyes against Penn State, you know, and so I think it will end up getting settled down and sifted out, and you know, like anything else, though, you better have the right people working on it.
Yeah.
And you know, that's been I think, you know, if I could point to anything, and not just in this college athletics piece, but if you look at any organization, leadership is the key. And it's going to be the key, whether it be, you know, in your country, in your community, in your university, in your sports organization, in your church. I don't care where you name it. Leadership is the key, and you know, I think we'll have to stay tuned.
If major college football wanted to go to a czar situation, where a czar is sitting there, a guy who is leading, who is looking at the future. You know, right now, it looks like television networks are really, you know, pulling the cart, leading the way, because they do planning ahead. Would you be interested in that job, Jim Tressel?
Well, no, I think that is a job that is going to be a decade-long job, and it would be good to get a czar who's really going to spend a lot of time and be there for a lot of time, have the right background, have the right, you know, values as to what sport is all about. There's many of us that would be happy to be helpful, but I think the leadership will be the key. You know, and what's difficult, I think, and again, I'm biased because I happen to coach, but I think someone or someone's a group of people have to understand what it's like to sit in someone's living room, you know, in Liberty City or Watts or you know, downtown
Glenville.
St. Louis or wherever, you know. And oops, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing here.
That's all right.
And someone who's had to coach, someone who's been through that, and you know, I just, as I look back over the last 3 or 4 decades, 5 decades, that's not that understanding of the most important. Who can coach coaches? Well, the only people that can coach coaches are the ones who have coached, not someone who's read a book about, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they don't understand. I want someone who has done surgeries and not someone who read a book about how to do a surgery. You know, and so again, that's difficult because you know, there's so many people who, you know, want to be I guess in charge, but the key to anything is selecting the right people to work on the task, and you know, so we'll have to see how that goes going forward.
Yeah, well, I'll let you go. And by the way, the last thing you ever want your surgeon to hear from your surgeon is "oops."
Yeah, right. Right.
Wait a minute, it was his left arm. Anyway, Coach Tressel, as usual, thanks for joining the. Is it Coach Tressel or President Tressel? Which do you prefer?
You know what,
You remember Senator was your nickname. Go ahead.
Yeah,
now.
right. I just, as long as I'm getting called something, you know, that means I'm still alive.
Exactly. Hey, Coach Tressel, thanks for joining the Tim May Show
right.
again, my man.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
wasn't the first time I've had Jim Tressel on my show. Won't be the last. Every time you talk to him, there's something new to talk about, Matt. But what's always stood out to me about him, and I brought it up in that conversation, is one of his, he loves football. Make no mistake about it. Was he a damn good coach? Damn right he was. The record speaks for itself. But, he really got into it more than anything else because he likes to effect, EFFECT. He likes to affect people. And it's really funny how he went from being a football coach with 110, 120 guys under his aegis or wherever I use that word aegis, to being a president of a university, Youngstown State, for many years until he just retired this past year, and affect tens of thousands, really, when you look at it. And it just speaks to kind of what kind of person he is, right?
It absolutely does. And I think the other, word, not only effect, but the other word that I would associate with Jim Tressel, and it's probably resounding that every player that ever came in contact with Coach Tressel as his coach, whether you were a walk-on, or preferred walk-on, or a scholarship player, is impact.
Yeah.
So affect. He wants to affect lives. He wants to affect young people. The way that you think, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you go do things that you would have done another way after you have that interaction with Jim Tressel, and he has an opportunity to interpret that, kind of sends you off in a better direction, and he's kind of like impacted your life.
Yeah.
And I think, my whole point saying that about the other players is like everyone would say, some that have played in the NFL, some that have, whether it's a high school coach or a college coach, and they've had, say you've had a half dozen coaches or 15 coaches, Jim Tressel's name will always be at one or two at the top of everybody's list, because he left you better than he found you, because he wanted to affect your life. And in many cases, because of the winning and the giving that I talked about earlier, he's now impacted your life, and those things don't leave you. They stay with you forever.
Yeah. He's the first person I ever heard use the word impactful, which, you don't hear every day. Well, actually, you started hearing it more and more after he showed up, but that is what it is. What a great conversation. And, he's always been cordial to me. I've always tried to be cordial to him, even though there were tough things to write about at times.
He knew which. The reason why is because he knew which Tim May actually said we were going to lose and which one said we were going to win in the predictions.
But here, exactly. Matt Wilhelm didn't. Matt Wilhelm mixed me up with Mark May, which is still stunning to me. I hope you're now mixing me up with Drake May.
Yeah.
The first there we go,
top
man.
5 pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah. I'm telling you, based on this past weekend. But speaking of that, what was your take on the Ohio State defense? And here, let me set you up with this. We're talking to the players after the game. The first play of the game, Indiana runs a speed option to the right side, to Indiana's right side. Sonny Styles jumps up like he's seen it a million times. So does Josh Proctor. We didn't know who was going to start at that other safety position. Josh Proctor got the nod and played maybe his best overall game as a Buckeye, 6-year player, right on down the line. You know all about Josh Proctor, but they, nail him for whatever, no gain or a loss. What my point was, they were not expecting to see the option, according to Denzel Burke. They hadn't really practiced against it. You obviously go against everything at least 1 or 2 times at preseason camp. But the way that team responded to the option, that defense, told me this is a new year for this defense. I mean,
it is.
Dumb point.
And I think
dumb statement, but wow, the light has come on, right?
It has, and I think it's you hope every game that you see that the light comes on for more and more players in this scheme, because again, the one thing about it, as you dig into like recruiting, is Mark Pantoni and his crew of guys, as well as Jim Knowles, when he gets out on the streets, is like finding players that fit my scheme. And in some cases, when there's a change in regime, this one happened to be defensively, you kind of have what you have, and you've got to sometimes maybe kind of like push that square peg into a round hole at a position that you don't love this guy yet, but there's really no one else. And he's like, you're invested in him. He's probably, 3rd or 4th year player.
And there's a game coming up. Yeah,
for sure. Exactly. So in this case, I was impressed with him. I think that, some of I'm not saying all of it, some of the success was centered around just the lackluster Indiana offense. Their inability to run the ball, their inability to throw the ball. 2.2 yards per rush, 33 attempts for 71 yards. A number of guys made their best attempt to run this defense. And I just think it's the usual suspects on defense for us. Steel Chambers making plays, Tommy Eichenberg making plays. I did, the one pass interference on Davison, and you can say his last name. I'm not going to say it.
Igbinosin.
Igbinosin.
Yeah.
Was a little, I think it was PI, but it's like, you love the competitive nature. I love the fact that through training camp that he's challenging Marvin every day in practice is only going to make him better, more NFL draft ready. But I will say the one thing that going into this, the one thing that I've been watching very closely is, regardless of the defensive coordinator, is I'm always, watching these 4-star and 5-star kids that, commit to Ohio State, and I want them to come in and make an impact. Like, we got so used to the AJ Hawks and the James Laurinaitis and the Vernon Goldstein and the Cameron Haywards of our world, just, being highly recruited and then basically playing 2 to 3 years of extremely high level football. And just like every time you dial them up, they deliver a play. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but, Jack Sawyer and JTT, almost feel like they have to be like, we're so used to the Bosa brothers, and Chase Young beating that tackle. We're rushing 4 or even 3, dropping 7 or 8, and they're just winning that one-on-one battle. And I just don't see that enough. You didn't see it last year, first year in the scheme. Didn't see it, and yes, JTT made some plays, I think a defensive player of the game, by whoever the heck votes on that. But just don't see those impactful, again, the blip was the big uptick was Penn State. Otherwise, everything comes down and it's just very ordinary, right?
Yeah.
And I thought when he committed and Sawyer being an Ohio product, a Columbus kid committing, it's like, man, I was like cloud 9. Like, we got the dual edges. They're going to affect the game and affect the game and affect the game. And it's like, I just see them, they're winning and they're probably grading out very well, but doing their job, but they're just not making those impactful plays that we have gotten so used to being made by our defensive ends.
Let me ask you this.
That's the one thing that I look to continue to see in this scheme.
Well, let me interrupt you though, from this stuff, because literally, Indiana came out and did something unexpected, overall, which was run the option. They ran the option a lot with those 2 quarterbacks. Even trailing, they still were running the ball. I think they only tried 12 passes maybe.
Yeah.
And I explain to people though, your responsibility as a defensive end, and even as a defensive line, it kind of changes when somebody's trying to run an option at you. So you're not necessarily, because there was no time in that game it became apparent that Indiana was just going to drop back and throw the ball. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Sure. When they should have been, even they weren't. And so I think that kind of, I don't know, I think that kind of blunted.
Well, you can, but here's the thing. I think it's one thing to monitor, and it's one thing that I watch very closely. And you can discount this Indiana game on the lack of production for those guys, given this, option that was a part of their game plan. But I think for Buckeye fans, the same way that we monitor so closely all of our offensive players and when things are going good or going great.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is the best defenses that Ohio State have had is when we've had an extremely productive defensive end who is a game wrecker.
Right.
Think about Bosa making the play at Penn State. You know what I mean? You can rattle off these impactful plays that these guys made.
Chase Young,
and for
Will
these
Smith,
2 guys who are now in year 3, you can rattle off a play or 2 that they've made. In now almost 30 games.
Yeah.
And that's an issue.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And here's the thing. You talked about Sonny Styles on week 1. Sonny Styles is a first-year starter. Let's call it, week 5, week 6 is going to have a Rolodex of plays that he's going to be making on a week in, week out basis and create like, oh, remember that play, remember that play, remember that play, remember that play, because he's just different, right?
Yes.
Well, we thought these guys were different, and they're just dudes.
Yeah.
Deserving to be able to play defensive end at Ohio State. And for God's sakes, both of them will probably project in the NFL extremely well because they have such a high upside.
Yeah.
I'm applying it to what benefits our program right now. And what I want to see is game wrecking, making plays of significance, especially in the second half or on third down more often.
And I'll tell you what, man, I mean, I don't mean to heap praise on, just the whole secondary, but I was impressed with Denzel Burke's almost professional approach on Saturday. And
you hope, because last year was an abomination.
yeah, because he was banged up all year, and he's
right.
We went through that. You and I talked about it, about you missing practice, but you're playing on Saturdays. That does not make for a great evolution as you go through a year, And the other guy that got me on Saturday was quite professional in the way he approached it. Was Lathan Ransom, number 8.
Yeah,
I thought the secondary played well. I think the stats even bear that out. There was only one pass of consequence, number 1, but I don't always judge it just on that. I thought
here's one guy to keep watching. That again, a highly recruited guy that I followed through the process. That I think in watching him jumps off the screen when he's out there is Caden Curry.
Yeah.
So when he's at defensive end, and I don't know his heights and weights versus JTT and Jack Sawyer, just how twitchy he is, on the edge, and it might be in backup duty, but so what? He looks like he's playing at a different speed, and to be doing that in his first, so I'll call it his first real game time, and to like pop off the screen to me in the way that I watch the game through my lenses, I was like, ooh, who's that?
Yeah.
And I go, was that kid? And then I realized it was the kid that I thought it was, and I'm like, oh, I like that.
But here's a great example.
His productivity, 4 tackles, 2 solos.
Yeah.
It's just
great example though of how the defensive ends for the most part weren't able to tee off. Even they put Kenyatta Jackson in there, number 97. I'm telling you, man, this guy had a hell of a spring, had a hell of a camp, and he clearly was held back in some respect from the standpoint of, not being able to just get upfield. And because if you watch it, you can see that he had to be cautious to a certain extent. He wasn't just teeing off. And when that guy tees off, I'm telling you, it's kind of like watching Bryson DeChambeau a little bit.
It is. Well, the one thing you can say, in a closing is we have to understand, because we're still operating, in 2 different divisions with a Final Four, right?
Yeah.
With these the last year of these old rules, it really is going to be a survive and move on mindset.
Yes.
And as we know, we have to we took care of business. It's done and over. You hope you see, best foot forward, whether it's McCord and Brown, McCord or Brown, or Brown or McCord, and start to, get, I'd love to see a 100-yard rusher out of our backfield, regardless of who that is, who happens to be, get the hot hand. We want to get Marvin, 6 to 8 opportunities. We know he's going to come down with probably 5 to 6 of them. Because of who he is. I want to see Ibuka used the way that we did with all the crossing routes and some of the verticals.
Yeah.
Cade is Cade. Nothing's really changed with him. So we just want to kind of see over the next 2 weeks our offense look more like it used to last year. Yeah. It doesn't have to mean we have to be rolling at the level it was when we played Georgia, because that was a work in progress too. But we just want to see the flashes of our elite talent in space, both offensively and defensively, being showcased by our coaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And good things will happen. And then you go into Notre Dame, who cares about whether we're a favorite or a dog, and what they've done up to this point against Mississippi State or, Tennessee State or whoever they play, or Navy. We don't really care. It's really just about us, and we have to survive this game and move on.
Yeah.
Because that's the big part of the process.
I'm going to tell Eddie George that you don't care about Tennessee State. I'm going to call him right now.
Call Richard McNutt. McNutt, I think, is the defensive backs coach for there.
And Eddie George is the head coach, and it's like,
I know he is. You can tell him. That's
was tough. I'm just messing with you. You know that they're feeling bad enough right now.
I know.
Hey, Matt, let's get together again after that Notre Dame game, man, because that's going to be, in my opinion, that I don't think that's going to be the toughest game they go against, but that's going to be the first really tough test for this football team.
And the reason why it's going to be a really tough test is, again, it's going to be on the road.
Yeah.
Hostile environment, national television. You've just played now, and I'm not going to call I'll say cupcake, because that's just you're going to play 2 inferior opponents. Can you scale your game up to match the intensity, of Notre Dame, who of course came to our place and got beat last year, and the eyeballs of the world will be watching that game. And also, lastly, they recruit the 4-star, 5-star level players just like we do. So you're going to get equivalent talent on the field together with a very, very well coached staff as well.
Like competition, as they call it. And boy, that's why it was so impressive what Florida State did in the second half against LSU.
I agree. Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Impressive.
It was, what's that old line? I think I used it with Coach Tressel. Some people say you're either the bug or the windshield, you were either the Packer machine or the pavement. And LSU was the pavement, and Florida State was the Packer machine. And that was that was a resounding victory against a tough opponent on opening day. Opening days are always interesting. Hey, last question I want to ask you, because you and I haven't talked since all this went down. The Pac-12 will be no more this time a year from now. The Pac-12 went undefeated in this past weekend, which figures, right? Maybe the best year in Pac-12 history as this goes down with all the teams they've got that could be possible college football playoff entries. What's your take as a longtime Midwestern guy, an Ohio State alum who played at the highest level? What's your take on the Big Ten going to 18 teams with no divisions and having USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington also in the umbrella?
The first thing that pops into my mind is I immediately go to, the travel associated with playing those teams. And now I know it goes both ways. They have to fly to the Midwest, and we have to go out there.
Yeah.
I think it's great for college football because, you look at Georgia's schedule this year in the SEC, and it's like you couldn't pick a more, cruddy schedule for the two-time national champions to play.
Wait, UT Steve Martin's pretty tough. Go ahead now.
Yeah. Steve, did you say Steve Martin, the actor? Is he the head coach?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
UT Martin.
I at first glance, I was kind of against it because my mind goes to USC, UCLA, California, West Coast, and you don't even assimilate. Why would they be a part of anything having to do with us over here in the podunk, Midwest, right?
Yeah.
But I understand the business associated with it. It makes all the sense in the world. But I think in some cases, kids in and around that we're recruiting, it's exciting to get on a plane and go fly to California and play a football game, or fly up to Oregon and be in Beaverton. A stone's throw from Nike headquarters. All the cool things that Oregon represents, individually and for college football. So I think that it's special, but I do think the traditionalist in me though goes, I almost think the no divisions in the Big Ten would be cool, because even I think Showcase during our game playing Indiana, it was Purdue's 22 miles away or whatever it is, and only gets to play us every 4 years. And Indiana, being in the East, gets to play us every year. Yeah. They get Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State every year. It's Purdue only gets those guys, every couple of years. So I think that would have been very interesting to begin with, but I think it goes back to maybe an offseason comment by Ryan Day about, the conference's expansion and so on is you figure, USC is going to be no dud with Lincoln Riley. Oregon's been up, Washington's up, that if those programs stay up, there's an opportunity to play, Michigan, Penn State, and a couple of those in a season. It's whoa. Does a 3-loss team get into the playoff, because of who their losses are to? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. It's going to 12-team playoff too, as you're pointing out there. And so everything's changing. Everything is still in flux, but what's not in flux is you being quite the contributor, quite the A-game guy when you come on the Tim May Show, man. I appreciate it.
I try my best, brother. You know that.
Hey, until next week, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for Matt Wilhelm, and I will see you then.